YouTube? What the crap's going on? Heir of Carthage here, back, and I have a fun kind of semi-historical matchup here. This one wasn't intended to be that way, but I wanted to make it that way. I really like using pre-marian Rome, which is what I've done here. And again, pre-marian Rome was Roman troops that came before the reforms of Gaius Marius. So basically, when Marius came around, he turned the Roman army into a professional standing army, rather than, I think, more of a... I don't know if it was... they probably could still have standing armies, but it was definitely more of a professional army. So, like, for instance, in pre-marian Rome, you had Hastati, Principes, Triarii, that represented the three different infantry lines. Well, of course, you had light infantry, too. In this case, I'm using Balearic Slingers. You could have also had Velites. Hastati represented kind of the newbies, the green troops, not as well tested through time or experience, and then their armor would have been lighter. The Principes would have been your heavy, experienced infantry, well-armed, well-armored, and the Triarii would have been your veterans. These guys had lots of combat experience. They made up the last combat line, and they were not hoplites, but would have fought probably more similar to hoplites than, say, the Principes or Triarii, and they were probably more reminiscent of pre-Republican Rome, so before Rome was a republic. Again, I could be wrong here. My history's not all the way up to snuff. And then, of course, I brought Italian allies, representing, again, that pre-marian Roman time. So I've got Sacchi Equites Extraordinari, these guys looking particularly sweet right now. And then I've also, yeah, those are my Equites Extraordinari. Over here, I've got two standard Sacchi Equites, and then another Equites Extraordinari. So I have two Lancer Cav and two Melee Cav, and again, it's just a Legatus here. So in total, 4 Hastati, 5 Principes, 2 Balearic Slingers, 3 Triarii, 2 Sacchi Equites, and 2 Sacchi Equites Extraordinari. So my opponent playing as Epirus is here. He's got a lot of skirmishers, which I feel like is probably a mistake versus Rome, unless you have the cavalry to manhandle Rome long enough to get your skirmishers to do their business. But let's take a look at what he's brought. Mercenary Rhodian Slingers, Cretan Archers, Slingers, Cretan Archers, and another Slinger. So 2 Slingers, 2 Cretan Archers, and a Mercenary Rhodian. That is a substantial force. That much focused fire could do a lot of damage to my men, but as you can see, I'm just going to rush my opponent and outflank him. He's using 3 Levy Pikes to hold down his center, and a couple of, he's got 3 Mercenary Etruscan Hoplites and 2 Mercenary Samnite Warriors, Royal Peltis General, and 4 Thessalian Cav. And he's focused all his cav on one flank, so I'm going to make him pay for that here. And I'm going to pull this Equite Extraordinari in to force his cavalry back out, which it does work. And I just about get a charge, but he reacts with these Mercenary Samnite Warriors, so I'm going to get out of here before I get javelined to death or shot to death. Sacchi Equites Extraordinari are not particularly powerful units. And my opponent is firing at my infantry line here. It's giving my Balearic Slingers more time to shoot his guys. So I am getting some kills with my Balearic Slingers and getting a lot of time to expend their ammunition, but my opponent technically has the firepower to wipe them out fairly quick. But as you can see, I'm going to pull my Hastati up close enough to his pikemen, and this is the best way to deal with Levy pikemen. So his idea here is sound. You have an unbeatable center, forcing your opponent to get shot at while you try and go around the flanks. But the problem with Levy pikemen is that they just get absolutely wailed on by javelin fire. And as you can watch here in a moment, my Hastati are just going to unload their javelins. And they already have. You can see Pila sticking all through these guys here, and it's about to happen again. And a lot of Pila to the face is not going to be good for Levy pikemen. Those guys are already very weakened. And then on the corners, he's going to have to engage my Principes. Now, these Mercenary Etruscan Hoplites are going to hold out till Kingdom Come against my Principes. They are very tanky units now, and not a bad unit to bring, honestly, as Epirus. But I am going to be able to outnumber and outflank my opponent. That's going to be his main challenge. I'm going to have Triarii to help support the cav fights. I'm going to really be putting a lot of pressure on my opponent's flank. And he has yet to kill my Balearic Slingers. And so, noticing that, I went ahead and quickly, before they died, focused fire on this center pikeman. And basically, I'm going to create a gap for my Hastati to get through. I'll be able to fall back here and push through the gap, and that's going to force his Royal Peltis General into combat and give me the opportunity to outflank him. So this is why, again, in theory, this is a good idea to bring Levy Pikes to hold down your center, but it's very dangerous because if you don't have the right units to support them, they just get picked apart by precursor javelins and skirmish fire. My opponent had the skirmishers here to get the job done. He didn't use them in time because of my rush, and that was intentional. I didn't want him to have time to properly destroy my skirmishers so that his pikes would actually be a problem. Now here Hastati are going to show their value, being able to hold up this Royal Peltis for as long as possible, while the rest of my Hastati outflank his remaining Levy pikemen. And again, this is the folly of pikes right here. It's extremely hard to use them. And then on the flanks, he's slowly being cut down by my infantry. Now, he's doing well in the fights in general, but he is slowly being cut down. My Legatus now has a line here to get through and get into these skirmishers, so I'm going to finish off his skirmishers. And my Balearic Slingers have gotten to expel pretty much all their ammunition in this fight. They're still firing, up to 135 kills, so this unit has been very well used. And considering the type of skirmishing advantage my opponent had, that was really fortunate for me to get that many kills. His Mercenary Samnite Warriors now outflanked by Triari, but they were fighting very well against my Principes. And his Etruscan Hoplites still have 98 men. They're actually winning the combat against my Principes at the moment, and he's going to get a rear charge in here. I am going to chase that Thessalian Cav, just trying to keep doing damage. So again, look, I'm continuing to kill his skirmishers, 163 kills now on my Balearic Slingers. And then his pikemen are now gone, so my general managed to destroy some of his slingers and probably some of his archers, and now my cavalry's free to start coming in here, as well as my Triari can come into the back of these fights. I'm just kind of slow to react again. That's typical for me. Yeah, anyway, I've got my opponent right where I want him, basically. That's Rome got the outflanking here. And that's another thing I actually kind of like about the little checkerboard formation, the Acer triplex, or Aces triplex, or whatever, triplex Aces, I think is what they call it, that Rome used. So my formation in this one is very flexible. It allows me to kind of change my formation quickly into whatever I need. I'm not sitting here saying that it's like tournament quality or something. I like it. It's a fun formation to use, and kind of true to real life. It's a somewhat flexible formation. He's still got one Levy Pike unit that's chasing me here, and he's got his Royal Peltis General, which is kind of a problem at the moment because this general just keeps eating up my Hastati units, but the Hastati units are cheap, and they're kind of slowly getting a few kills in the Royal Peltis, and just keeping it from being over here in combat with my Principes where it needs to be. And again, you can see these Mercenary Etruscan Hoplites are actually very even in combat with my Principes until I was able to get rear charges in. So that is a very tanky unit. 77 melee defense when in Hoplite wall, 85 armor, and that's a pretty good weapon damage, honestly, for a Hoplite at 29. So yeah, I'm going to get rear charges with my Triari. Triari are also a very good spear unit. No match for an Etruscan Hoplite, I don't think, but they're a very good spear unit. 95 armor on them. And here's where the Royal Peltists are going to start falling. They've been doing great, but Royal Peltists are not particularly good at defending themselves from shot cavalry charges. They have fairly low melee defense for an elite sword unit. And they're a great unit, don't get me wrong, but the Royal Peltists really do suffer against shot cavalry, and I'm going to kind of expose that here with these cycle charges from my Soki Equites, who are getting a lot of kills on them from what you can see. And it's basically going to destroy the enemy Royal Peltist, up to 104 kills on those Equites Extraordinary. And it's at this point when my opponent really doesn't have the tools to win anymore. It was a fairly close fight for a while, but because of the infantry superiority and my opponent's losing his pikemen in the center, it was only a matter of time. So he was able to hold me on the flanks to start with, but his skirmishers just did not do enough damage to pay for themselves. And you know, my opponent's build here is not my favorite. There's a few things I would call into question here, and I'm saying this not to be mean, but just maybe throw some advice out there. He seemed to really also be surprised that I brought a semi-historical Roman army. He was like, what? Hastati, Principes, Triari? So he was very surprised by that. Honestly, I love playing with pre-marian Rome. I think it's fun. I think it makes the game more interesting to play with these type of armies. But in any case, as we take a look, his Royal Peltist, again, got a lot of kills, but it was mostly versus Hastati, so these guys didn't really end up paying for themselves. They are a very capable sword unit, and they're good for multiple things, but in this case, they were not able to get what they needed, even though their kill total looks quite nice. The Mercenary Samnite Warriors are up against Principes, which is not a good matchup for them unless they get a very good charge, and even still, it's not a very good matchup for them. The Etruscan Hoplites did their job. They held for a very long time. But he really needed these Thessalian Cav to hit my men in the back while the Hoplites are holding, and he just didn't have enough units to get this done, because in the Cav fight I had him matched for numbers, plus I had Triari. So by spending 1,800 talents on these skirmishers here, and then another 500 here in these two, basically, it really added up. I mean, this is 2,000 some odd talents, and if you think about it, that's basically 3 Roman heavy infantry. And that is a lot of heavy infantry for these guys to try and kill during the course of that fight. Holding in the center with pikemen is a good idea, but you should know that whenever you hold in the center with pikemen, that means you're going to immediately be outflanked, which you can use to your advantage for sure. So he could have taken all these skirmishers and focused fire at my Principe's unshielded flank as I went around him on both sides, and potentially done a horrendous amount of damage versus my Principes. Now, another thing that happened here was I split my cavalry and all my infantry to the flanks, and all I had in the center was Hastati. My opponent could have potentially pulled these Thessalian cav through his own center, charged into my Hastati, knocked them over, and tried to get to my Balearic slingers, all the while just raining a hail of missiles down again into the unshielded flank of my Principes who were moving to his flank. And potentially he could have won a flank that way. His big problem, though, is that all the while he was going to be coming under pressure from my own cavalry, and he didn't really have a lot of cheap spears. So I think it would have been better in this case to maybe just go with even just standard archers, so that he could have gotten a couple of militia hoplites, and then he would have been able to get some flanking fire into my infantry and still had some spears to help out against my cavalry, which would have freed a little more of his cavalry to get after my skirmishers and potentially given him the time that he needed. Again, though, it's a very challenging fight based on the way it's laid out. But so a good game to my opponent. Hope you all enjoyed this one. I know I did, and I will be back soon with some more Total War Rome 2 action.